Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I am your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we're continuing to march through another offseason together. All right, folks, welcome to today's episode. Today we are talking about the fire sale that seems to be happening in South Florida. The Miami Dolphins appear to be in a full-blown rebuild. At least I think they are. I'm not 100% positive they think they are because, we'll just go right to the top. They dump some big names in their contracts, Tyreek Hill, Bradley Chubb, several, other guys. They release Tua, and then this week they trade Jalen Waddle to the Denver Broncos for a first-round pick and I believe a third and a fourth-round pick. Now, my immediate thoughts to that were I'll be honest with you, my first thought was Brian Thomas Jr. again can't go for much less. It's the equivalent to like the 25th overall pick. Waddle, he's certainly more experienced, has a longer history of production, but expensive player. And obviously, the Broncos now have to find a way to have him fit into their ecosystem. But beside that, my thought was, this seems like a Dolphins team that I at least think is more or less waving the white flag. It doesn't look like Achane is being shopped. Adam Schefter reported that teams have been told he's unavailable. He is the best player on their roster. So perhaps, they just are putting their foot down, like we're point blank not trading this, Pro Bowl, all-pro potential talent. But for me, if I'm the Jaguars, and how I think every general manager should operate, and how I think they probably operate closer to in reality than most people think is, you have to have your finger on the pulse for all kinds of these situations. So if I'm the Jaguars and I have 11 picks in the draft, and the Dolphins look like, they're hungry for picks. They seem like they will more or less take picks at any clip. They need cheap talent as well because they're taking on a lot of dead money and moving on from some of these guys. So Jaguars have 11 picks. Who on the Dolphins would make sense? Now, Achane, obviously, I think, doesn't make sense after they signed Chris Rodriguez. You have Rodriguez, Bayshal Tuten, LaQuint Allen. It seems like they already have, their running back by committee kind of depth chart that they like. That's not to say Achane wouldn't be the premier back if Jacksonville somehow acquired him. And when I was projecting for the Jaguars to lose Travis Etienne in the free agency, before they had signed Rodriguez, I would have said, that's a trade they should be interested in making. Obviously, I think you can take him off the board. So who else is there? Like I said, the Dolphins seem like a team that the Jaguars should be able to kind of, pick at the remains to an extent of their last regime. Find guys who ultimately still have value, but might be more valuable for other teams than for the Dolphins right now. Two guys I think make a lot of sense for the Jaguars to consider in a situation like that. First and foremost, defensive tackle, Zach Zeeler. It might be Zeiler. I apologize. Regardless, 25 and a half sacks over the last 3 seasons. A lot of quarterback hits, a lot of production. Shows up against the run, is versatile, is athletic. He will be 31 in September. But he still has several years on his contract. Considering his age, this is probably the most the Dolphins will be able to get for him. And what the Dolphins could get for him, he's not an elite blue chip defensive tackle, though he's certainly, I'd say, in the top 10 to top 12 range. And I think ultimately, he's somebody who, if you're just talking about from the Jacksonville Jaguars perspective, he can step in and make an impact right away. He can be used around the formation and Anthony Campanili's front. Campanile had some lighter guys at times at nose tackle as well, not just at 3 technique. He kind of asked for his defensive tackles to be able to play both spots. he can provide some interior rush, interior push. I mean, a fourth down package with Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, Eric Armstead, and Zach Sealer, is a better rush package than the Jaguars have probably had in some time. So he's certainly somebody who I think is interesting. He's also been a team captain. He's a top guy off the field. Would the Dolphins be a better team next year if they had him? Obviously. He's still a really good player. He's still really productive. But like I say, he's going to be 31. The Dolphins can probably get, something for him now that they can add to this rebuilding team because they know regardless of whether he's on the roster or not, they're probably going to take some tough L's. And like I said, it's at least the read that I think most people have in Miami. They have made some moves that seem like signing Malik Willis, if this was their plan, seems interesting to me. I guess that should have been the case the entire time, but especially in the wake of trading Waddle. So maybe they aren't really in a fire sale. But if they are, this is one of the guys I think makes sense. Another one who I think would frankly be perfect for the Jaguars, linebacker Jordan Brooks. He one of the most underrated linebackers in football, really talented guy, but he's on the last year of his deal. The Dolphins very easily could, accept that he's maybe won't re-sign next year, get something for him now instead of having to wait, to get a comp pick years down the road. So I think ultimately, he's somebody who his play is still at really high level. If you're asking me to rank the linebackers in the NFL, I'm ranking him higher than Devin Lloyd. I would have said that for pretty much the entirety of both their careers. I mean, Brooks has just been a really steady linebacker. He's not on a very expensive deal. I think his cap hit is like $10 million this season. Overall, though, it's less than the 3-year investment in Devin Lloyd. He signed a smaller contract than Devin Lloyd signed. I think he could give them better play at the position. So to me, if the optics of him potentially being available were even flagged out there, I think the Jaguars should be all the way in. I think him next to Foye Oluokun, Anthony Campanile can work with that. I think it would give him quite the duo to work with. And then you're potentially, adding guys to the defensive front four through the draft. You're more or less adding Travis Hunter at cornerback. You're adding Caleb Branshaw at safety. If he hits, that's a big boost. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways the Jaguars can, create a splash. I think adding either one of these guys would improve the defense quite a bit. And it's not as if they're available because they're bad players or anything like that. It's just the timing of things. Like the Jaguars, when they started their rebuild, when they traded Calais Campbell, Calais wasn't done, but they were going to lose with him anyways. And it made sense to get something for him at the time as opposed to holding on to him and getting absolutely nothing. So I do think the Jaguars, had the flexibility and even have shown the aggressiveness to make moves like this before. And this isn't me saying, I've heard that they're going to make them or anything like that. I just think these moves make sense. And ultimately, I think this is something that if the Dolphins are officially waving that white flag and are officially, making it clear we are open for business, this is something I think the Jaguars should be interested in. This is something that I think would make them a better football team in 2026 than they were last year. And if they're in any way able to be a better team next year than they were this past season, when they went 13-4, with the limited cap space they had, with the lack of a first-round pick, that'd be quite the feather in James Gladstone's cap. And situations like this are also why I think it's so important for the Jaguars to stockpile on as many draft picks as they can. For when teams are rebuilding, for when teams are opening up for business and having those fire sales and essentially stripping their franchise of spare parts and saying, give us anything, we'll take it. These are the situations where I think it really comes into play. And that's why I think the Jaguars are smart to continue to stock up on draft picks moving forward, because there'll be another version of the Miami Dolphins next season with talented veterans ready to give up on talented players. With teams ready to give up on talented players for draft picks. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. We'll be back next time.